Our witnesses here today are pretty historical. Joining us via Zoom, we actually have Mr. Abraham Bolden. Mr. Bolden was an agent with the U.S. Secret Service appointed by President Kennedy in 1961. And sir, we want to thank you very much for attending today. We are very happy that you are here. Mr. Bolden, if you can, please give your opening statement.
Chairman Bolden and all the distinguished members of the committee. My name is Abraham Bolden, and I'm an Secret Service agent from 1960 to 1964. I helped protect President Kennedy and also Dwight Eisenhower and LBJ Johnson. Now, we have a document here that all Americans should respect. And it says we hold these truths to be evident that all men are created equal, that are endowed with the Creator, with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we support what the forefathers wrote. Now, growing up in East St. Louis, Illinois, my father, Daniel Lynn Bolden, my mother, Ophelia, I noticed that there were quite a bit of trauma and things that were going on. I wanted to get to the bottom of criminal activity, hate, racism, lack of respect. So after I graduated from Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri, I became the first African American after having a choice between becoming a music teacher in Kentucky and a Pinkerton agent. I chose the Pinkerton agent because I wanted to find a solution to the problems that we were having in America. And that became my goal in life. Now, when I became a Secret Service agent in 1960, I was surprised at what I found. The racism, the inequality of job assignment. Now, everything that I will tell you today, none of it came from research. I am not a researcher. Each fact that I give you today, they were from my specific actions. No one has prompted me to say anything. I've been waiting for this opportunity since 1964. Now, as it so happened that God made it possible for me to answer one of my dreams first, and that was to meet President Kennedy. President came to Chicago after he won the election. By me being a Secret Service agent, the Secret Service disrespected me as an agent by replacing a position near President Kennedy and putting a fireman in my position. And they placed me by the bathroom at McCormick Place. There were lots of jokes about it in the office of the United States Secret Service. All I wanted to do was carry out my duties to God and my country and the President of the United States. But they took my position which should have been near the President, and placed me by the washroom at McCormick Place, 2 flights down from the convention hall. Now, when the motorcade stopped in front of McCormick Place. The president, the first thing he wanted to do was use the washroom. And there I stood. Now, the president walked up to me and we shook hands. He asked me, was I one of Mayor Daley's finest or a Secret Service agent? I notified him I was a Secret Service agent. Then he asked me, he invited me to come to Washington, D.C. and become the first African American appointed as a Secret Service agent, which I thought was very great. But in becoming an agent, I found that there were so many cracks in his petition. The agents were drinking on duty. Some of them were smoking weed. They were going around with prostitutes when they were supposed to be on duty. And they were particularly racist against President and Robert Kennedy. There were some who were also worried about the fact that they thought that President Kennedy and his family were trying to form a dynasty. I heard a lot of talk about them finding a dynasty. That President Kennedy would be first, then Robert Kennedy, and then Kennedy. And then, when that happened, then the Catholics would run America for the next 100 years. And that had to be stopped. Now, on the detail, as I said, there was a lot of drinking, a lot of smoke. And I became against it. I warned them about it. Now, when President Kennedy was coming to Chicago in March of 1963, we got a call from the Federal Bureau of Investigation who had a meeting. President Kennedy was doing Chicago. This was in March. We received a call from the Federal Bureau of Investigation here in Chicago from a person who the FBI identified only as Lee. And this man, Lee, said that President Kennedy was going to be assassinated between O'Hare Airport and the Conrad Hilton Hotel. So in order to protect him, we had the airplane land, and then we brought him by helicopter to Meigs Field, which was not being used at the time, which I thought and recommended that they do that. That was my recommendation how to get the president in. Now, during the president's trip in March, I noticed one thing, that every time the photographers would take our pictures together where I was concerned, that they had an agent assigned to remove all of the negatives. They took them, and I don't know what they did with them. But we haven't been able to find suitable pictures yet. Now, as I said, I was one of the strong agents who was on their tail about their conduct. And they didn't like it, and I didn't like their conduct. So we were even Steven. So I had an opportunity with President Kennedy's invitation to go with the president to Massachusetts, to Hyannisville. They were very disrespectful to me, calling me nigger and different terms such as that movie. And they made it miserable for me as an agent of the United States Secret Service. So the president invited me on July the 2nd to go to ride on Nantucket Sound on his yacht, the Marlin. The president did that. And I was seated next to the chief of the United States Secret Service, Rowley. While we were on the yacht Marlin, the president sent to me lunch, clam chowder, and said, the seller who brought me the lunch, I'm going into this to tell you what type of person, what a wonderful person that President Kennedy was. And he made intention, had me placed on Air Force One, and also on the Marine One, which was a helicopter with Otis Air Force Base. But this type of habitual drinking and wildlife continued even after the 4th of July in Harrisburg. When we were on Air Force One, I mentioned that to Rowley. I told him there was too much drinking going on. He told me just enjoy the yacht ride. We'll discuss that later on. Now, we get back to Washington, D.C. Now, one incident I want to make clear is that I was standing outside the Oval Office on June the 29th, about 7 o'clock in the evening. A big chauffeur limousine pulled up in front of the White House door. The other agents had left for lunch. President Johnson exited the chauffeur limousine and slammed the door as hard as he could. He walked straight to the Oval Office where I had interdicted him, and I was standing by the door first. I walked before he did because I figured where he had to be going. And I was the only agent there to take control of the situation. President Johnson, the first thing that he said as he passed me and walked into the Oval Office, he said, you bastards ain't trying to send me to jail over some goddamn cotton. And after that particular time, an argument ensued between the president and Bobby Kennedy that was so violent, or lots of violent words about Bobby Baker, about cotton. I couldn't distinguish every word that they said. But when Johnson left the Oval Office, he first wanted to know who I was standing by the Oval Office door. His chauffeur told him he must be Secret Service or FBI, or he couldn't be standing there. Now, as Johnson exited the office, he looked back, told the president and Bobby Kennedy, you bastards are going to get enough of fucking with me. Those were exact words. And he was in such a stiff and violent mood that I reported it to the then head of my shift leader, Harvey Henderson. Harvey Henderson's report was, I'd kill a motherfucker myself if I had a chance. Now, some of these facts are in The echo from heated passage was a book that I wrote. Some are not, and I left them out simply because I felt that my life would be in danger if I included them.
Mr. Bolden, if you can for a moment, we actually have some questions in regards to your testimony. So is it okay if we move to some of the other witnesses for opening and then come back to you with specifics on your experience?
Move to other witnesses and come back to you with questions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
And also to both the ranking member, Mr. Garcia, and I would like to thank you for your service to this country, especially as the first African-American Secret Service officer. Your sacrifice for this country and your service to this country does not go unnoticed, so we applaud you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My next question is for you, Mr. Bolden. Mr. Bolden, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay, sir, thank you for sticking with us so long. I know it's been kind of long, but if you can, real quick, what did you observe about the Secret Service investigation of President Kennedy's assassination?
It was one of the greatest cover-ups of a crime. Now, the Secret Service initiated so many cover-ups. Number one, the number of bullet fragments that were found in the car. Harry Gagline on November the 26th looked at the car, the assassination automobile, and he found two cartridges laying on the front floorboard. They were very damaged. And he also observed a bullet hole in the windshield. And he was told not to let the FBI know about any of this and to get the car to Michigan somewhere where they could put a new windshield in and clean the car up. Now, the biggest thing that I was talking about was the violations of constitutional rights that followed, especially in my case, simply because I wouldn't be quiet. I was framed, I was arrested, they attempted to declare me insane. And I was put in Springfield, Missouri, forced to take drugs, mind-boggling drugs. Now that stems from the fact that on the 18th of November 1964, I was called to Washington, D.C. And they told me they were going to give me another name, change my identity, and that I would become another individual. And that, in fact, did happen. And I think that they were setting me up for assassination myself. I think that that's what was going on. Because when they sent me to the penitentiary, they made it clear that it was a case of my being so agitated about the assassination that I wouldn't keep quiet. And so they gave me 2 trials. They had 2 convicts that I had arrested. And they put me on trial twice in 1 month. And that was never heard. They kidnapped me out of Washington, D.C., violation of my constitutional rights, denied me an attorney, simply because they said I was not a player. I was not a team player. I wouldn't keep my mouth shut. And so when they did that to me, they sent me to Springfield and put me in a camp there where I was threatened by one of the inmates. And they used that as an excuse that on July the 7th, 1967, two guards came to the camp and got me and took me to what they call 2-1-East. And they undressed me, got me naked, threw me in a cell. And the next thing I know, they were forcing medication on me. The guard came by, he says, we have medication time. I said, I haven't been before a court. No court has said that I was insane. You're supposed to take me to the court. But they didn't do that. They forced me to take these drugs. One of them knocked me out. I fell on the floor, hit back, and had to go into the hospital to have it looked at. And this is how they treated me now. I was kidnapped out of Washington, D.C., brought to Chicago, denied an attorney by the United States attorney. It would be Henry Hand. I was then not given any food on that night, which was May 18, 1964. They didn't let me eat anything because they kept talking about I was not a team player and I didn't keep my mouth shut. And this is how that they control the cover-up. Agents became afraid. They didn't want to talk. And there were so many cover-ups. The chief Rowley put out a memo that said any agent that gave information other than the information that he would provide would be censored severely. Well, when they found out that I wanted to go to the Warren Commission, who was investigating the case appointed by President Johnson, I asked to go testify to the Warren Commission about what the Secret Service were doing and the type of protection that President Kennedy was receiving. And so they brought me from Washington, D.C., denied me an attorney. Every constitutional right was violated and forced me to take medical drugs, stripped me naked, removed me to such prisons. Now here I was, an ex-Secret Service agent. They locked me up with people whom I had put in jail myself. I was threatened by these people. And it really affected me and my wife, Bolden, who stuck with me throughout this ordeal. And to anybody who's listening, if you have a good wife like Barbara was, keep her. Keep her, because that's the scripture said. A double band is not easily broken. And they're talking about people like my dear wife who passed away in 2005. So I just want people to know that the constitutional rights, when I was on trial in July the 12th, the jury was debating whether or not on a verdict. The judge called the jury forth and told the jury, in my opinion, Bolden is guilty of all the counts in the indictment, which were 3 counts. That jury did not find me guilty. So the judge set another trial for 2 weeks later. For 2 weeks now, a second trial. And we asked for a new judge. The judge himself, in violation of the federal procedure, heard the motion himself when the law says that if a complainant files a motion for change of judge, that the judge who the complaint is against shall not make the decision as to the prejudicial action. So here I am now. It took me 90 years for anybody to look into it. It broke my heart because America is supposed to be the leader in constitutional rights. It's supposed to be a leader in democracy. Yet, I felt so abandoned by the system.
I will say, at least I speak for myself, I do not believe that Mr. Bolden was actually guilty of a crime. I do believe that he was falsely, if you will, framed. And so on behalf of the U.S. government, we'd like to apologize to him and his family, because obviously that's not how we are supposed to treat people in this country.
Hey everybody, I wanted to call your attention to one surefire way to deepen your knowledge of the assassination of President Kennedy. And that's to read my 3 books about the CIA, a trilogy of spies that tells how the assassination actually unfolded in the eyes of CIA insiders. You see, my work on JFK's assassination is rooted not in the literature of conspiracy, but in the history of CIA operations. And that makes all the difference when it comes to understanding the events that culminated on November 22nd, 1963. You'll want to check out my 3 CIA books that tell the story of the founding generation of the Central Intelligence Agency and what 3 insiders actually thought about JFK's assassination. Meet charismatic Station Chief Winston Scott as he surveils Lee Harvey Oswald 6 weeks before Dallas. Meet urbane CIA Director Richard Helms as he fends off President Richard Nixon's attempts to blackmail him over JFK's assassination. Meet James Angleton, the ingenious, paranoid, and sinister counterintelligence chief